99 Pages is a community committed to reading and discussing 99 pages every week to improve our lives, to improve our public discourse, to be a little bit less lonely in this pandemic, and to find people that want to talk about the issues that we care about. All this month, we have been discussing
99 Pages is a community committed to reading and discussing 99 pages.
Lovely background noise. Gotta love it. Thanks. So I see my panelists laughing at me in the background. All the time, we have been reading Onward by Elena Aguilar, an incredible coach for educators, and really talking all about emotional resilience. And so that's why I'm excited to introduce you to our guests. But first, though, I do want to preview what we'll be reading next month. It's Tattoos on the Heart by Gregory Boyle. He started the largest gang rehabilitation and re-entry program in the US out of LA called Homeboy Industries. This is also a best-selling book. It's a really easy and compelling read. And as someone who thinks about fundraising, just a personal share, I'm going to read you a quote from page 179. And the quote, because this one impacted me as I think about fundraising for things I care about. He writes, "Funders sometimes say, we don't fund efforts, we fund outcomes. We all hear this and think how sensible, practical, realistic, hard-nosed, and clear-eyed it is. But maybe Jesus and others doesn't know why we're nodding so vigorously. Without wanting to, we sometimes allow our preference for the poor to morph into a preference for the well-behaved and the most likely to succeed. Even if you get better outcomes when you work with those folks, if success is our engine, we sidestep the difficult and belligerent and eventually abandon, quote, the slow work of God." It's just an interesting piece that, like, if you want numbers, if you want results, maybe you're just going to go for the low-hanging fruit and like what's easy. And sometimes the work that we do, anti-racist work, social justice work, it's long and it's hard, and it's not like a quick and easy survey to show to funders. And so I just like, efforts matter, outcomes matter, but just remember that this is a long game that we play. So many interesting topics, whether you are someone who knows someone who's been in prison, who's been in a gang, if you are an educator, if you are a funder, I just think that this is a book that could appeal to many people. But enough about me. You didn't come here to talk to me. You came here to meet my incredible special guest. So I'm going to bring him up. Dr. David Fakunle. Let me put up your little title up there now. David, I got to meet because I sat in as a participant in one of his incredible storytelling workshops. This was in Baltimore, Maryland. I was lucky to get access to him through a network called Baltimore Core that believes in kind of creating an army of social change agents throughout the city every year. So definitely look them up. And then later I got to meet David when he was emceeing at a conference called Light City, also in Baltimore. He was emceeing for the health lab. I was emceeing for the educator lab. So I love that it brought us together. But David, let's start with this title, which we talked about beforehand. You have many titles. I'm curious, what would you title yourself? What is it that you actually do? Please tell us.
I try to answer that question all the time, and I don't think I've ever really come up with a good answer. So I came up with the title Mercenary for Change. And that happened in 2016 when I had the honor and pleasure of attending a kind of a retreat at the Aspen Institute through American Express, and connected with all these wonderful people, first and foremost, who are also nonprofit leaders. And many of them are my friends to this day. And I've done a bunch of these events, so to actually leave with some real good friends is always a great thing. So in the midst of the many conversations we had, I came up with the title Mercenary for Change. And the reason I like that title is because it describes the way that I navigate many sectors and many spaces. So first and foremost, I'm an artist. I've been an artist. That's dope. Okay. I've been an artist since I was a little kid. I grew up in the household of a singer. Who is the daughter of a singer. And I was always around music. I was always around art. When I was a little boy, I got introduced to storytelling. I got introduced to African drumming and African dance. I got introduced to theater. So art captures much of my essence. And then later in my life, I became a social science researcher, particularly public health, and combining my interest in mental health and behavioral health that's how I kind of got to this point of intentionally blending these different talents and skills and opportunities and spaces to address complex issues. And for me, as a Black man, the number one issue in my mind is racism and the manifestations of racism in our society and what it has done to the health and well-being of everyone, but particularly people of color.
I want to go. So you said you started as an artist. How do you go from art to social science research? Like, that seems like a big jump to me. So just like walk me through that. And I think about life design a lot. And I work with high school students on how they think about designing and testing their life around different hypotheses. You are so talented. There are many paths you could have gone down. How did you go into social science research? I'm curious.
So that happened before my senior year of undergrad. I was a psychology and criminology double major at the University of Maryland. I was looking for something to do. The summer before my senior year, I didn't want to do a traditional job. So I started getting these emails about research programs, summer research programs. And, you know, there were universities here, there, and everywhere. The one that caught my eye the most was the University of Miami, because, yeah, I would love to spend a summer in Miami. So I started applying and got to the point where I needed to get some letters of recommendation. So I started thinking, okay, which classes did I do well in? And where did I establish good relationships with teachers? So I thought of my developmental psychology course. I developed a real good student-teacher relationship with that instructor, Dr. Yamalis Diaz. She's out of NYU now. And she said, yes, I'll give you a letter of recommendation. And in exchange, I want you to consider this research program that I did as an undergrad called Project Learn, based out of Rutgers University in New Jersey. And I said, okay. So she connected me with the folks at Rutgers at Project Learn. I got to talk to them, and I talked to some of the potential mentors. And the mentor that I vibed with the most was Dr. Andrew Peterson. He's in the Department of Social Work at Rutgers. And this guy helped me to get it. He was able to tell a story where social science research was relevant to me for the first time in my life. I was 20 years old. I was naive in thinking what research was. I'm thinking dorks with lab coats, with goggles, doing stuff that didn't interest me. So I immediately thinking chemistry. I hated chemistry. Chemistry is the reason why I'm not an aerospace engineer like I thought I'd be since I was a little boy. That and physics. So I didn't want anything to do with research. It just didn't seem relevant to me. But he was able to craft an imagery of how social science research applied to my life. And that was a light bulb for me. It was like, okay, this makes sense, and this is relevant to the things that I saw growing up. And I've always been curious about that. I am well aware that I am a Black man in the United States of America, and there are a lot of things in this country that don't work to my advantage, actually work to my disadvantage. And because of the environment that I was in, I was able to overcome a lot of that, be protected, honestly, from a lot of that. So we talk about resilience. I developed resilience through opportunities. And I always wondered about that, because I can think of my friends, my colleagues, people I grew up with, and they did not have the same chances I did. And it always deep down bothered me. So I wanted to understand that, if nothing else, and hopefully try to do something about it, but really ultimately understand it. So through this program, Project Learn, I got this 8-week crash course in social science research, the concepts, the theories, the skills. I mean, it was a boot camp. We were working like, I don't want to say professional researchers, but certainly in that mode while learning this thing. Man, I felt like sun up to sundown. And that was the catalyst and just a kick in the pants to say, you know what, I think you done found a space for yourself.
Wow.
So I graduated from Maryland, and I knew I wanted to go to grad school. I knew I had 2 parents that were going to make sure I went to grad school, but I needed the time to figure out what I wanted. One of the things that I learned at Project Learn about grad school was don't go if you don't know what you want to do. It's not like undergrad. Grad school is to become a specialist. So if you aren't committed to that, don't do it. It's just a waste of time and energy, and it'll discourage you. So that empowered me to say I'm not ready. I wanted to work. I wanted to make some money, kind of live my life as a young adult, and all the while get more insight as to what route I should go for the research that I wanted to do. So naturally, I was interested in protective factors for young Black men. What helps them to have a positive trajectory in their lives? Because I wanted to know what helped me to have a positive trajectory in my life, and how can you replicate it? So I heard all these different pieces of advice. You could be clinical psychology, community clinical psychology, community psychology, urban planning, social work, on and on and on and on. I talked to researchers at NIH, University of Baltimore, UMBC, University of Maryland, Baltimore County. Just all these maybes. You could do this, you could do that. And at 22 years old, I didn't need what you could do. I needed someone to tell me what to do. I got that from a professor at Johns Hopkins. This Black woman, Deborah Furholden, when I met her, she said, you need to get a PhD in public health and you need to get a master's in social work. And I said, okay. So that's why I chose public health, because she told me to. She gave me the direction that I needed in order to take this route in social science research. And I've been a part of it ever since.
That resonates with me. My mom is one of my, best friends and role models and champions, but she's always so supportive that she never gives me actually her opinion or her advice. She's like, whatever's best. I'm like, no, you know me better than anyone. I'd actually love for you to tell me what to do. And of course, parents are worried about leaning too far in that direction. And it is really the great mentor who's like, this is the road that you should carve. This is a path. And it can be helpful, when there are too many options.
I'm terrible with too many options. I mean, look, taking me to a restaurant like the Cheesecake Factory, which has this huge menu. Too many good choices, will be there forever. Just tell me what I should eat. So I'll ask the waiter, what do you recommend? Because that's saving me a lot of headache, in making a choice and possibly being disappointed by the choice. So yeah, she was exactly what I need. I think about the hero's journey, which is a model that I teach a lot in my workshops. And there's part in the hero's journey where you get to meet the mentor. You meet the guy that really helps to solidify your path. And that's exactly who she was for me. And I'm grateful for that. And then even when I got at Hopkins and started that particular journey, there were people within that institution that solidified another path. And when you talk about this intersection of arts and health that I occupy, that's where it happened. And I'm a big believer in serendipity. I'm a big believer in the universe aligning things, because when I think of the story, it's almost like the butterfly effect. If one thing changes, this doesn't happen. And because of my awareness of the story, I have a huge appreciation for that, because it's small things. It's small things that I could or could not have decided to do. I could have not decided to do this talent show at Hopkins when I first got there. My office mate at the time could have decided not to tell my instructor that I was a storyteller. The instructor could not have insisted that I use storytelling as my course practicum. I could have gotten, a bad recommendation from the clinical and executive director of the recovery space that I worked in. So all these little things, these decisions that people made completely altered my life.
Wow.
And I have a collection of stories like that from the time I was a kid to now. And it never gets old. And I can only continue to be, we're talking about Thanksgiving tomorrow, grateful and thankful for those little moments in my life that have put together this trajectory that I'm currently on, a life that I never could have imagined I'd be living right now. And then fast forwarding that to research, how do we generalize that for other people? Because I should not be one of the few that gets to do this type of work. There's so much ingenuity and genius, and you're an educator, so you see it all the time. You see the genius in people, and you think to yourselves, are they ever going to get the opportunity to manifest it? And we know that because of systems in this country, so many people don't. And as someone within that space that could very easily be that statistic, frustrates the hell out of me.
I hope someone watches this video and sees you and sees the path and hears your story and gets inspired, right? To see them. They want to see themselves in you. Right. We need more Davids in this world.
And that's why I haven't got my hair done since February.
Well, I love actually with, Trevor Noah on the Tonight Show, he has changed the dynamic of a late show comedian having to wear a suit and a tie. He's wearing a sweatshirt. He's not cutting his hair. Like, I think he's helping to change the stereotypes around what success, in a particular, in a white supremacist culture, needs to look like.
No doubt. And I think what we continue to see, especially this year, is the importance of representation and how far that goes to show people what's possible. And I think if anything has been solidified because of this year, it's the importance of that. You know, people, yes, representation matters, but you know, of course, we know that's not enough. But we have to start somewhere. And I think, you know, think about the inauguration. Think about how many young girls that night were activated and the trajectory of their lives were permanently changed. Just seeing somebody look like them on that podium saying they're the second most powerful person in the United States, which means they're the second most powerful person in the world. Yes, a Black woman can say that. You know, a South Asian woman can say that. And how many other girls are now going to be empowered just by seeing that? They don't necessarily understand the gravity of that moment, but they just see she looks like me. That's what we're talking about. So I want to be that person for sure if I do nothing else. But then I also want to encourage people to diversify their perspectives and to break out of structures that only exist because we perpetuate them. That's the hard part, because we're talking about, you know, it's one thing to, you know, get plastic surgery, so to speak. You can change your face, you can change your body, but you can't change your DNA. But within this space, we can change the DNA of education. We can change the DNA of public health. That's hard. And that's going to take time, and that's going to take the moments that we can create to help people see a different perspective, to diversify how they view the world and how it can operate for everyone. And even that notion of it can operate for everyone is radical. And that's where we are.
First of all, you telling the story of Kamala Harris's acceptance speech, it gave me chills, because it is really empowering and really exciting. And then you mentioned getting perspective. It ties us back to what this is. This is a book club, because for me, reading has always taught empathy. Storytelling helps put you in someone else's shoes and like really get perspective from another point of view. And you've mentioned, and I want to direct us to storytelling, because like that is your domain. That's how I met you. You mentioned the hero's journey earlier. So I'm just curious, a little bit of your hero's journey, like what drew you to storytelling? How, just for you, first of all, has storytelling impacted your life or changed your life?
Oh man, I'll try to get through this without crying, but no problem. So we've, again, thinking about those butterfly effects. My mother decided to put on a radio show as we would drive into our African drumming and African dance classes on Saturday mornings. It was the griot for the young and young at heart. And the host of that show was a storyteller by the name of Mary Carter Smith. Born in Birmingham, Alabama, she was, you know, grew up in the Harlem Renaissance. She was friends with Langston Hughes. She helped start Big Brothers Big Sisters, helped start the Arena Players in Baltimore. So she is a cultural arts legend.
Wow.
And by the time she entered my life, she was an elder. And we would listen to her show and listen to the stories that she would tell and the stories that she would read and the ventures into cultures, you know, of the African diaspora that she would reveal to people. So when I was 9 years old, the National Great Blacks in Wax Museum unveiled a wax figure for General Colin Powell. National Great Blacks in Wax Museum was founded by my godparents, the late Dr. Elmer Martin and Dr. Joanne Martin, friends of my mother for years before I was born. So this awareness of Black history and Black culture was something I was born into. And at the museum, it was a big celebration, a lot of media coverage. My mother still has the newspaper clipping from I think the Baltimore Times, when I got a chance to read Mary Carter Smith's poem, Color Words, to General Colin Powell and his wife. And Elijah Cummings was there too. I just looked at the picture not too long ago and noticed that he was in the picture of me reading. So there was a celebration at the museum after the event, and within the celebration was an impromptu talent show. There were a lot of kids who were children of employees and just neighborhood kids. The museum was always about elevating the people in the neighborhood. That's why it's on the 1600 block of East North Avenue and not downtown. Jackie, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So within this talent show, there was a kid who wowed the audience. He controlled the energy. He was, he was fire. I'll give him credit, and I was jealous of him. I like to be a showstopper myself. I felt like I had to reclaim the throne. So I decided, in whatever depth of decision making my 9-year-old brain had at that time, to tell the story that I heard on Mary Carter Smith's radio show. It was called The Yellow Ribbon. And lo and behold, Mary Carter Smith was in the audience and heard me tell the story.
Wow. And
she was so impressed by my rendition of the story that she mentioned me on her radio show the next week. And, we heard it. And it was awesome. And she reached out to my mother and asked her if I could join her on her radio show to read stories and just be a part of the show. And as I did that a few times, she started to take me under her wing and she started to teach me storytelling.
Wow.
So I had my first performance with Mary Carter Smith at, I want to say 10 years old. So probably the following year at the top of the World Trade Center in downtown Baltimore. I had never been inside that building before, and the view is incredible. If anyone's ever had a chance to see it, and anytime I get to go to the top of the world, it's breathtaking. Makes Baltimore look so beautiful, which it is at heart, So over the next several years, I learned from someone who is considered a titan in Black storytelling. This is like me learning basketball from Michael Jordan.
Yeah.
This is like me learning baseball from Hank Aaron. This is like me learning, pick a something and then pick the best person to do it. This was what I had. I had direct instruction and mentorship from an OG of storytelling and someone who was revered around the world for what she did. And it was for me and my sister. So my sister eventually joined us too. And we entered this world of Black storytelling. So we connected with another griot, Stanley Bunjo Butler, and we started to craft this art form with other youth. And we became the Growing Griots of the Griot Circle of Maryland. And that's a local affiliate of the National Association of Black Storytellers. So we started to do performances. We started to learn more stories. We performed in, Richmond, Virginia, New Orleans, Louisiana.
Wow.
What was interesting about that was the year before Katrina hit. So I distinctly remember seeing the hotel that I stayed at a year prior, underwater. It was wild. So we engaged in all these opportunities to maintain its tradition and its art form. And I wonder to this day if Mama Mary knew everything that she was setting forth before me. And see, this is usually the part where I start to tear up, because she passed away in 2007. I was 20 years old. I wasn't at the point yet where I took storytelling to the next level. And when I think of her now, I wish she could see this. I wish she could see how her art form, her skill, her genius is now permeating within the space of public health research. Is permeating within the space of science, art, her art, the culture of the African diaspora, my people, who I am, who I genuinely am, is what I'm doing to help challenge the pedagogy and epistemology of a centuries old science form. That's crazy. And this little old lady from Birmingham, Alabama is the reason for all that. So I can't help but to be eternally grateful to this woman for giving me this vessel by which I can leave a legacy in this world. And all I really want to do is to be remembered fondly. And I distinctly remember times in my life where I didn't think that would be the case. So to have these opportunities where I am appreciated for who I am and what I do is all I could ever ask for out of life. So I'm truly grateful to her and to all those mentors and guides that set forth this path for me, for helping me to be remembered.
Now, you've mentioned two pretty profound mentors already in your story, and we're not even to the present day. Clearly, that is like such a powerful thing for you. And I think that's how we kind of create change, is through connection and inspiration. Because I personally am so interested in coaching. I got this book because I wanted to learn more about coaching. This author is an expert coach. How do you, in your life, make space and time, which can be really hard, to mentor others, to coach others? I'm just curious, how do you think about doing this for others?
It's inherent to the work that I do.
Mm-hmm.
Because of my history with mentors, and not all of the stories have been, peaches and cream. There have been some difficult lessons that I learned, and some of those have been fairly recent, quite honestly. It's interesting with life, and everything turns to life. There are all the things that you can be taught by your parents, by loved ones, whatever the case may be, but ultimately there are some journeys that you have to take on your own. And this year in particular was that moment for me, where not that I was completely alone, but some of the people who were my staunchest supporters and really benefactors in this work were no longer there. And in retrospect, I think unconsciously, this was as far as they could take me, because the route that I wanted to take in my career was not something that they were prepared for. And I venture to guess they just didn't know how they could help me. So it's created other opportunities to find other resources and find other mentors. And that's what I've done this year. And because of how critical that was to my doctoral study and how critical that's been to really developing my career so far, I want to make sure I'm as available as possible for anyone who asks for my help. Anyone who emails me, anyone who texts me, anyone who calls me. I may not be timely with my response these days, but I will respond, because I don't want to be the person that stifles their abilities. I don't want to be the reason that they don't go forth with something that they truly believe they should do. I know what it feels like to have someone doubt what you can do within a space. And at first I was angry because I took it as an affront to what I could do or my lack of skills, and more so what I'm looking to do is beyond their understanding. And that's evolution. The work that I'm doing with storytelling in public health is an evolution. That's why I think there's relatively so few people that do it. So I am setting a tone and creating a space for others. And I do that intentionally. I want to create a space for others. I don't know everything. I will never know everything. I don't want people to just take my word for it. I want people to explore it. I am laying bare what I think storytelling is capable of in public health. Prove me right and prove me wrong. But let's explore what this thing can do. Because what I do have is enough moments so far to show there's something to this.
Yes.
I've been able to convince researchers, faculty, students, community members, business leaders, politicians, all over, that storytelling has a place in health. So I must be doing something right. There's still more work to be done. And there are other people who will be able to take this well beyond my imagination. And I'm not jealous of that. Go ahead, do it. Because I believe in what this can do for the health and well-being of all of us. So take it to the levels that I am just not capable of doing.
Well, we have a question from the audience related to this topic of mentorship. And first of all, everybody, I just want to second what he said, which is, I did cold message him on LinkedIn. And he said, yes, I will make time for you. Sure, I'll come on your little educator book club. Yes, I will advise your startup. So I think some people, hear it and don't act on it. And I just want to encourage anyone listening, like, act on offers of mentorship. And I'm going to read this question from the audience, from my actual incredible Edwell co-founder, Paula. What would be your guidance for people to find mentors, particularly for high school students or about to graduate into a world with a lot of uncertainty? She also wanted to share, thank you for sharing your story with us. So yeah, how does someone find mentors?
That is such a good question. I would say, think about what you're interested in and look for people who are like-minded. And it may not be an exact match, and a lot of times it won't be, but I think maybe conceptually and practically and theoretically, there'll be some points of connection where that mentorship can begin. And it does take courage. You know, it takes courage and it takes perseverance. I remember how many emails I had to send Dr. Furholden to get her attention. I'm discouraged by that. These people, you know, especially like researchers, are so busy. They're just busy with the work, and then they have lives too. So I really grew to appreciate that, and now I'm experiencing it in my own life. So it's still wild for me to think that I'm the person, just one of me. I'm the person that others are now reaching out to for insight, for guidance, for understanding. It's wild because in my mind, I'm still trying to figure it out myself. So it's like, why are you coming to me? but I see that as an opportunity to show humility more than anything else. People may call me an expert. People may call me a thought leader. People may call me a trailblazer, whatever. I'm just a human being trying to figure this thing out just like you. And I think we could do a much better job of reminding those who are coming after us of that reality. As a parent, and I know you're about to join that world, Jackie. As a parent, I have a greater appreciation for my parents now. So I'm 33 years old. I think about what my parents were doing at 33, you know, sure, raising me and my sister. But I think about the questions that I have in my own life at 33, and I got to raise another child, you know, raise another human being and help them figure out the world while I'm still trying to figure it out. That's such a interesting complexity that you experience. And I'm like, I can appreciate the job that my parents did helping me to understand the world while they're still trying to figure it out themselves. That's one of those processes in life that many of us experience. And I think as a mentor, we should not be too big to say, I'm still figuring it out. So anyone who I talk to, and I love talking to people, I mean, that makes my day so much fun. I love the variety of perspective and experience and background that I get to have through mentorship. And I will tell people, there's what I know, there's what I don't know, but I'm happy to learn, and I'm happy to figure it out together. I believe in a collectivist approach to figuring out the complexities of life and society and health. So it starts with those opportunities and those persons who reach out to me and say, I want your help. How could I not say yes? How could I not? Again, it would pay me to be the reason a person doesn't become all that they're capable of being. Because, and for me, I'm grateful for those people that said yes or extended themselves to mentor me, because look where it's gotten me. And I'm grateful for that. So the best way to show gratitude is to do it for others. And that's what I do as best I can, as much as I can.
Well, again, Thanksgiving is tomorrow. I'm grateful that you have said yes to me.
Of course.
Help understand, you know, the connection between storytelling and mental health. Now, you've mentioned, like, you are making the case for this. Can you help draw it out for us? Like, what is the connection between storytelling and mental health? How does and how can storytelling improve resilience?
Whew, okay, try not to be here all night. For many people in the world, storytelling is how they express their navigation of life. It's the common language that we as humanity share. Even if the words sound differently, the perspectives are different. but this exploration of existence is something that we all do. And it's so profound and overwhelming at times that the only way we can even begin to understand it is just by sharing what it is. That's storytelling. It's inherent to our human experience. So for me, seeing women in recovery from substance abuse tell their stories within the rooms of Narcotics Anonymous, which I was a part of as a little kid because of my aunt, who has been in recovery my whole life. As a little kid, I saw how telling stories was healing. And the stories, I mean, ran the gamut. Yeah, people were talking about the highest of the highs, the lowest of the lows. But at the end of these meetings, people seem to be at more peace. You know, they seem to be happier. They seem to be connected with these other people going through a similar experience. So for me, I see storytelling as one of the most basic ways that we can build connection with others who are going through this experience of life. And we know that it is filled with many journeys, some that are beneficial and some that appear detrimental. The work that I do is to encourage people to see the positive aspects of their nature, who they are as people, throughout the totality of their stories. So I go back to the women of NA, Narcotics Anonymous, who were telling their stories every Saturday afternoon. I rarely heard the good things that came out of an experience other than they are now in recovery. So that part is understood to me. But I wonder how many examples of their nature they showed, even in what we would call the lowest of their journeys. And the initial work that I did with Discover Me, Recover Me was just that. We heard a lot of the same stories that we heard in the rooms of Narcotics Anonymous, but this time we had an opportunity to reorient how we saw those stories and to encourage the people with whom we work to see the positive aspects of their character, their nature within those stories. Because that experience, my personal experience, just helped me to understand that telling your story and seeing these reminders of who you really are, because we'll get told what we're not every day if we let it. You know, that can be done from a societal level, that can be from a familial level, that can be from a personal level, the way that we view ourselves. We talk about self-esteem, you know, we talk about self-efficacy. Sometimes we need another person holding the mirror for us to see it at a different angle. And that's what my mother and I do. We can hear the same story that you have shared with other people in recovery, your family, your friends, the clinicians, therapists, whoever. And all we're doing is shifting the mirror a little bit and saying, look at this. Do you see this now? And what it has done is provide people an emotional foundation for their recovery from manifestations of trauma. That's what storytelling does. It allows us to see people. So we hear these terms like you see me, you feel me. It really means that. Can you experience my essence? Can you experience who I truly am and who I try to be? And storytelling, better than anything I've seen in my life, does that. And in a profound, intentionally vulnerable, and connective way.
Powerful. Now, I work with teachers, you know, all day, every day, and I hear a lot of negative stories. I hear a lot of limiting beliefs. I hear, particularly in this pandemic moment right now, I'm failing my students. I'm a failure. I'm not enough. I'm curious, how would you coach these teachers? What kind of workshop would you run? We have an audience of educators. What would you tell them to help them reframe those stories?
Yeah, that would need to be a workshop. That would need to be a session. That would totally need to be a session because first and foremost, teachers, you are enough. I mean, where would these kids be without you? I definitely have a greater appreciation for teachers. I already had a good appreciation for them, but I have an even better appreciation for teachers now. Just the dedication that it takes and the selflessness that it takes to do this work. And I think in hearing those stories, saying, you know, they're not enough, I'm failing your kids. The first thing I would say is, but look how much of yourself you're giving to these kids. Look how much of your talent, your time, your energy you that you're giving to these kids. And, you know, they may not be related to you by blood, but you connect with them on an emotional level. You connect with them on a level of potential and opportunity to ultimately, hopefully, change the world. And I think many teachers seize that opportunity and they take that very seriously. And with all the things that go into education, how we equip people to navigate life, there's there's always so much to learn and only so little time to learn it. So I can understand this feeling of inadequacy, but man, think about how much you are saving these kids. Seriously. Yeah, you may not have taught them everything that you wanted to teach them because you didn't have the time, the resources, the energy. But think about how much you did teach them. And you may not, and see now, you know, in research, we call this a longitudinal study. Yeah, we want to follow these kids 20, 30 years and see how they turned out. I'm sure my teachers, if they had the resources, would love to follow me 20, 30 years and see how I turned out. Hopefully they'd be happy with their work. But I think there has to be certainly a faith for sure that you are doing the best you can for these kids. A realization, and I'd hate to say a calm, but almost, yeah, take some solace in knowing that, you know what, I could have these kids for 24/7 and wouldn't be able to teach them everything. That's not how life works. There are lessons that I had to learn that my mother didn't give me, my father didn't give me, my aunts, uncles, elders, teachers, professors didn't give me. That's how life works. But I think if you can, at the very, so here's my call for teachers. Here's what I, as long as you teach these kids to be kind, understanding, thoughtful, considerate, and critical thinkers, they'll be fine. And imaginative and creative.
Amazing.
That's it. That's it. And if you want to sprinkle in some practical skills like how to manage money and manage time and things like that, great. But the reason I'm eager to work with you and to work with Paula is I think you all foresee the necessary shift in education. Again, you know, what I do in public health is challenging the epistemology. I think in education, we're getting to the point where we're challenging the epistemology. When, here we go, not an advertisement, but when you have something like this,
yeah,
that can give you all the information in the world in seconds. Anything that I want to know from any subject, what can you teach me? Do I need to know the periodic table of elements? No, I got this. Do I need to know what happened in the War of 1812? No, I got this. Do I need to know what's happening in pick a country around the world? No, I got this. So what are we spending our time on from 8 to 3, Monday through Friday for 9 months a year?
Right.
What you teaching me? And you know the context of Baltimore. I guarantee you to a person, a lot of those kids, that's the question they got for the educational system.
Relevance.
For 8 hours, no, not 8 hours, 7 hours a day. 7 hours a day. I gotta be in this building, which for many of us looks like a prison. We won't go there. We don't have time. And you're teaching me things that I could easily answer with this. Why are you wasting my time? And oh, by the way, I have all these challenges at home because of these structural issues that are not being addressed or even talked about within this space that I got to spend 7 hours a day, 5 days a week. That sounds like a full-time job for 9 months out of the year.
Yeah.
Why? And because of the existing structure of so many educational systems, at least in this country, people are scared to answer that question. But I think there are enough of us, you, Paula, myself, and many others that we know and don't know, that are being much more explicit and courageous to ask that question and to start to try and answer that question. And I want to be a part of that shift. So many people say education is a great equalizer. We're talking about race and socioeconomic status and all that kind of stuff. Not the education that a lot of people are getting is not.
Yeah, not today.
It is not.
It can be.
It can't, but and that's the point. That's the hope. That the hope is that it can be. It can be. if we change how we are equipping our kids, our youth, our future, and to what end and for what purpose? Is it for their purpose? Is it for our purpose? That's a philosophical question that we have to answer before we can proceed with any of this work.
Well, first of all, you reminded me this week we're getting a teacher in the White House so soon. So again, I don't think federal government is a magic wand. I think we got a lot of issues, and I believe more in like a bottoms up theory of change, like people like me and you and educators around the country, more than the power of Jill Biden, however awesome she may be, or Kamala. I'm sure she's got some connections to Ed as well. I want to come back. We started with your anti-racism work. We talked about representation. And since you care so much about storytelling, it did make me think, whose story are we telling? You know, in what ways is and again, maybe we're talking about Hollywood, maybe we're talking about different types of storytelling, but I'm just curious, you know, a lot of people see images of what they're not. And I'm just curious, I don't know, how can we use storytelling to break the norms, and in what ways are we doing a bad job of storytelling in this country, whether it's pop culture, whether it's Hollywood? I'm just curious.
Well, to me, it's understandable that much of humanity tries to strive for the ideal, the best version of ourselves. We want to get the most out of life. And I think because of that, we have been introduced to these paradigms of what that looks like. We also have to be mindful of the structures that have perpetuated certain paradigms. And in the US, we can't escape white power and white supremacy. So this idea of the story and the storytellers and the storytelling, the way that it's been done, has been dominated by an advantageous system for the majority people. We know that's changing, and that's why we're seeing this seismic shift. So to me, it is about representation, not just who's at the table, but who's running the table and what's being produced from that table. And is it allowing others' perspectives on life to be shown? Because we know how powerful it is to just show things. Think about, you know, how much people have seen this year in 2020, the stories that have been told. You know, one of the other things that I do is I'm the chair of the Maryland Lynching Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And we are charged at looking at the history and doing our best to bring justice to the victims of racial terror lynchings in the state of Maryland. I have said that the stories that have been told about the desecration of Black bodies through this year have been more than we could ever convey and do to convince people. So all I have to say is Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd. Everyone has a story on what that looks like. So it has revealed things to people that they could ignore or simply did not know. Now, granted, that's obviously the worst story or one of the worst stories that we can share, but it emphasizes my point of exposure to perspectives not of your own. Those were perspectives that could be ignored for a long time. But because of, I think, the democratization of storytelling, which a lot of times comes through this, the fact that we can tell stories wherever we want, and this type of technology is readily available, and we have marketplaces where we can deliver those stories. So it has forced what the larger streams of media have had to portray. Look at how Black Netflix wants to be now. Look at how Black Hulu wants to be now. Look at the issues that they're talking about on your cable news. The fact that we're talking about not just racism, but the depths of racism, like intellectual stuff, shows me how the story has been changed because, again, of the democratization of storytelling. That has to continue. It has to continue to share that truth, but not be consumed by it. So we talk about, in Baltimore, we say poverty pimps, those people that come out and certainly speak in support of the disenfranchised and the poor, but they're only advancing their own cause and only seem to show up when something bad happens, or something that generates a lot of coverage. I think we can also show the work that people have been doing to address these issues. It alters the conversation about not just how detrimental things have been, but how beneficial things are becoming. And in all likelihood, that is the dominant story, but it's just not being told. So it shapes how people see things. I mean, look at the portrayals of Black people. You know what I mean? Like that has a lot to do with how a large portion of this country sees a person like me, because the stories that have been told, that have been reinforced, have honestly been devoid of people who look like me. So again, it's shared by the dominant culture. Their caricature or stereotype of me is what becomes now the truth for so many people. And that's why we get what we see, and the perpetuation of the systems that support, only so many.
Well, let's bring this back to education, because, when you're talking about the victims of racial terror, I mean, I feel like in school, I learned more about the victims of the Holocaust and how evil the Nazis were. And I heard less about what our government did, or the victims of slavery, lynching, racial terror. Now, you go to Germany now, you see so many memorials to those who have been lost, and you see no like monuments to Nazi officials. You come to the US, I can think of like one monument, Brian Stevenson's monument of the Equal Justice Initiative to the victims of racial terror that's in Alabama. And I only heard recently of a monument to those who were lost during the Great Passage, and there's some beautiful underwater sculpture. Those are the only two I can think of, David. And instead, there are like thousands of monuments to our Confederate generals. I'm from Virginia. And this is something that 99 Pages, actually, we read Cast by Isabel Wilkerson earlier this year. We read Wes Moore's 5 Days about Baltimore. And so I'm curious, how can we change education, history class, English class? Let's go back to relevance. How do we make education more relevant in whose story we choose to tell, what authors we choose to read? I'm just curious, how would you rewrite the curriculum?
Oh, man. You try and give away all the secrets, huh? That's fine. I'm not trying to, it's not proprietary. So I ain't worried about what I get from it. To me, it's, well, first and foremost, you got to challenge the relevance of what is being told and what is being taught within schools. I think that's becoming a lot easier, quite honestly, because the hypocrisy has been exposed. Now, as to what we do teach, that's a challenge, because there's so many perspectives that we would love people and our students to get. How do you prioritize what they learn? Quite honestly, I'm thinking about the Montessori style, and I know that has a lot to do with the fact that my son's in a Montessori school. I personally like that approach, kind of guiding students to what they want to learn. There's only so much that our brains can hold. We're not trying to create encyclopedias. We are trying to create critical thinkers. So for me, I would almost frame our education around these fundamental questions. If we want to go patriotic, what is the pursuit of happiness? How does that look? What examples in our history have exemplified that, but then also have been contrary to that? Why is that the case? What are some practical ways that we can be happy? So what are some skills that can encourage and empower happiness? Or what captures curiosity or understanding? So for me, I think about virtues. When I got introduced to the Virtues Project several years ago, that completely changed my philosophy. So for me, it's how do we grasp the concept of understanding or love or diligence? What can we find from our history that are examples of that in different ways? What are practical ways that reinforce that virtue? And then what do we need to imagine to take those virtues to the next level? So it's about creating citizens. We want to make productive, contributing citizens to our society, and people that will forge the evolution of society. We are not a complete product, far from it. We have not reached the pinnacle of what humanity can be. So to us, we have to present the questions. It's almost like here is your task for life. And we may or may not see your answers, but we trust that you'll do it in some form or fashion. What are the essential questions that we as a society, a human society, are trying to answer? And what skills, tools, and explorations do our generations that are preceding us need to go through in order to equip them to start answering these questions. That's, to me, that's relevant education. How can you improve your own life, and how can you improve the lives of those around you, those that you love, those that you respect, those that you care for?
I love that so much of what we talked about have come back to, you propose here, essential questions. But a lot of what we're diagnosing is wrong with education is like not enough people asking why, right? Students need to keep asking why. Why am I reading this? Why is this relevant when I have this, as you mentioned? But also teachers too. Why am I being asked to do this? Like, I do think why is one of the most, because there's a why that expresses curiosity, which is one of my favorite, mindsets. But also there's a why that challenges the status quo. And if nobody's asking it, we're not going to change the status quo. So I'm a big fan of that. I'm curious. I know we're wrapping up here on our hour. And so I have mentioned your workshops. For those who haven't been lucky enough to attend, can you tell us a little bit about them? And I'm in particular curious if you could tell us an impact story about someone who has attended a workshop and like what it's unlocked for them. And I know we talk about longitudinal stories, you might not get all this data, but if you want to make it real for someone by telling them like a simple little case study of someone who's been to a workshop.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So let me see if I can recall. So my main workshops are around skill building with storytelling. So understanding the basic tenets and components of a story, thinking about the ways that you can utilize your creativity within storytelling, and then some of the, I think, key messages that your story can deliver. So when I think about, building your narrative, that particular workshop that I do, that's about giving my audience an opportunity to think about, well, what is the core message that you want people to walk away from, or walk away with from your story? If they remember nothing else about you, what do you want them to remember? And then building a story around that core message. So when you think about your characters, the settings, when you think about perhaps your place on the hero's journey, those are some tried and true approaches that you can use to help craft that narrative. And even thinking about how you tell the story itself. It's not all about just standing up in front of an audience and speaking, which is what I typically do and what I like to do. But this directly brings forth other art forms. You can dance your story, you can sing your story, you can sculpt your story, you can perform your story. All of that is fair game. And the one thing that I reinforce with my audiences is that people love creativity. They love the expression of imagination. They love to explore their own imagination. And a lot of times people don't do it enough. That's why it's weird for them. The other workshop is about the application of storytelling as a healing practice. So what are some of those questions within recovery from trauma and the depths of which trauma can affect so many aspects of our health that storytelling can help to elevate and help people understand? And that's what that workshop is typically about. Now, in terms of an impact story, so many of the impacts are the people that reach out to me and say that they heard me somewhere. It blows my mind that I have a reputation. It blows my mind that I actually have some sort of cachet, that people consider me an expert in all these terms that they throw around. It blows my mind. So those are the impacts that I see all the time. But one that I got recently from a colleague of mine who was actually in grad school. We were in the same training program at Hopkins during grad school. She happened to come to the last workshop that I did and participated. And she sent me an email the next day, and she thanked me for the workshop because it reminded her and reinforced that her story mattered, and that her story could intertwine, intersect, and really integrate successfully with the research that she does. That it's worthy of being explored, it's worthy of being expressed, it's worthy of helping to guide what she wants to understand about this particular nuance within public health. Those are the impact stories that mean the most to me, because I can say I did my part to help someone be the best version of themselves. That's all I want to do for my family, for my friends, for random strangers. I don't care. We only get one shot at this. Not to sound morbid or anything, but it's true. And yeah, I think about my life and what time I may have. And I think what gives me solace is that as long as my life is quality, I don't care how long I have. People will remember what I was able to share with the world and what I aim to do with the time I had, no matter how much time it is. And if I can do anything for people, is to help them get the most out of this life that they have. I can think of no greater honor. I can think of no greater contribution to humanity than that. And it just so happens that storytelling is the way that I get to do it. And that's awesome.
That's incredible. We're going to end there because that's super inspiring. Now, we are a community of readers. And so, Dr. Fakunle, like, if we want to read your work, where can we find it? Where can we find your words?
You can find some words at discovermerecoverme.com. You can, I tell people, and it's not to sound arrogant, just Google me. Like, seriously.
Right.
The thing about being a mercenary is that my work is all over the place. So if you want to see David the researcher, you can find some stuff like that. If you want to see David the activist, you can find some stuff like that. If you want to go on YouTube and see me perform, you can do that. Whatever floats your boat, there's probably a David for you. And you can reach out to me. Again, email me, hit me up on Instagram, hit me up on Facebook. We're stuck in the house. What else am I doing but checking social media? So,
well, thank you. I'm gonna put your name up one more time so people find you on all the platforms, read your words, and sneak peek. Dr. Fakunle will be joining us next month as well to discuss this book. So thank you.
Got a book to read. All right. Then I actually got to read this time.
Let's actually close with just one thing that you're maybe unexpectedly grateful for this Thanksgiving. I know that's a touchy, sentimental, but top of mind.
I'm grateful for revelation. I'm grateful for what this year has revealed to people. I'm grateful for what it has helped people to understand and grasp. I am grateful for what has been activated in people. I am grateful for those who are courageous enough to push back against things that are fundamentally wrong, that are fundamentally an injustice against humanity, and those who are now orienting their lives to that purpose of the preservation and elevation of quality life. I am grateful for that because it makes my job that much easier. It makes the impact of the work that much stronger, and I enjoy it that much more. So I'm grateful for you. I'm grateful for Paula. I'm grateful for all the people I've met this year, all the people that I will meet, and those who are committed to helping people get the best out of life and just be happy.
We're ending there.